what Christian said is exactly right. This is journalism on trial, and Julian, when he stood up to speak, I have to say his voice was so weak that we could barely hear him. He almost sounded like a changed man, and that's what the years of detention and the months of incarceration in Belmarsh have done to him.
What happened in court?
It was one of the most searing events I don't like calling it an event, but it was an event. It was an atrocious event. In this courtroom, presided over by a judge. She's a mere magistrate, actually.
Magistrate
but
Vanessa
elevated
Barrett.
her to judge, in which she said imperiously to Julian Assange, "Have you anything to say?" And he stood. "You stand, Mr. Assange." She was her dictatorial gestures to this sick man through the whole thing were just disgraceful. And he stood, and his lips moved, and nothing came out. And still nothing came out. And I strained to hear what he was saying. And he said, for 10 years, he said this very falteringly, for 10 years, the superpower has had all this time to prepare a case against me. I am denied the opportunity. I can't even have access to my writings, as he calls it. He means the documents.
His defense documents.
His defense documents. He can't see his defense documents. To say it is surreal is not enough. It is truly appalling.
You're saying the judge was biased in favor of the extradition attorney acting for the United States?
Yes. No, she was biased. Biased. All the judges have. The previous one, Lady Arbuthnot, whose husband, Lord Arbuthnot, was revealed in WikiLeaks cables to be up to his neck in the national security state and arms companies and so on and so forth. She should have never been sitting on the bench. But this one, her bias was incandescent. I've sat in a number of courts all over the world. I've never seen anything like this. It belonged in a show trial in the 1950s. Moscow, Prague, you name it. And they called, this is London. Do they know what's happened to justice here? There's no reporting of this.
It didn't make Channel 4 News here.
No, it didn't make, nor the BBC.
It made headlines around the world, but not here in this country.
Deliberately excluded. The most important case, a publisher and a journalist is brought to a court. He is convicted of nothing, charged in this country with nothing. The charges against him are not only concocted, but as his QC pointed out yesterday, the treaty, extradition treaty between Britain and the United States has a specific section in it that says a person cannot be extradited if the offences are said to be political. The 16 of the 17, at least, charges against Assange in the United States are unlawful. They are political.
The whole thing is a grotesque absurdity. I mean, there is an extradition law between this country and the United States, and it states specifically someone cannot be extradited if the offences are political. And the offences are political in law. Yes. In law, it's not a bit of agitprop. It's not an opinion. They are political. So all but one charge is based on the 1917 Espionage Act, which was used to jail conscientious objectors during the First World War in the United States. and on a non-existent conspiracy between Chelsea Manning and Julian. It didn't happen. That's why Chelsea is in prison, because she refuses to go along with these concocted charges.
You met Julian Assange in Belmarsh prison, not far from this studio. Chelsea Manning, of course, refusing to testify against Julian Assange. She's in solitary in the United States. Tell me, first of all, about Julian's health.
Julian's own condition is, how do I put it? I was shocked because he'd lost more weight. He was isolated. They seemed to be imposing a regime that must be punitive on him of isolation. He's in the health wing, what they call the healthcare wing, hospital wing of Belmarsh prison, but he's in a single cell, and he told me that I see people walking by and I'd like to talk to them, but I can't. Category A prisoners, murderers, and others who've committed serious crimes are allowed to fraternize. Julian is not allowed to fraternize.
A United Nations expert on torture says Julian Assange is being subjected to cruel and degrading treatment and that several democratic states are trying to break his will. The Special Rapporteur visited the WikiLeaks founder in London's Belmarsh prison, where he's being held and is said to be extremely unwell.
Julian Assange had physical consequences, clearly, from not being able to access dental and medical care for several years. The much more serious aspect is how he has been mentally and emotionally affected by the extremely hostile and increasingly arbitrary environment. So here he really showed all the symptoms that are typical for a person that has been exposed to prolonged psychological torture.
Was the UN mentioned? Because she seemed unmoved by any of the reports. I'm not sure whether Assange's attorneys
She's not only unmoved, but she said it's not up to this court to consider the conditions in the prison. That is not what we're here to do today. Why isn't it? Why isn't it? The man has been so mistreated. I saw him last Thursday. His spirit had returned in some way because there was something ahead. There was a court case. There was the beginning of the fight. But watching him in court, that spirit had just departed. He's lost almost 15 kilos in weight. He's isolated. When he walks through the prison, the other prisoners are put back in their cells so that he can't fraternize with them.
But, of course, there are people in authority, arguably, tweeting, this is Assange faking it in court to try and get off because he can get off on health reasons.
I know you've got to ask these questions, Afshin, but it really, we shouldn't be describing even suggesting that somebody who has been so abused, so mistreated as Julian Assange is faking anything. The courage of this man, the fact that he is, when I ask him how he is, he's always reserved. I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm all right. He always wants to reassure me and reassure others who see him that he's okay, when clearly he's not okay. I know because we discussed on Thursday what he might say in court. And I'm sure that he'd practiced and tried to memorize words, but they couldn't come up.
The papers covered, I don't know whether that second paragraph of what he said was quoted in some media.
Yes, they've published excerpts of this. They're saying, said Julian, the journalists and whistleblowers are enemies of the people. They have an unfair advantage dealing with documents. They know the interior of my life with my psychologist. He's referring to this case in Spain, which has proven beyond doubt that the CIA was running a Spanish company all the time he was in the Ecuadorian embassy to spy on him. Not only just to spy on him, but to spy on his lawyers, on his doctors when they came to see him, on people like me when we came to see him.
The Spanish courts are looking at the allegations of a CIA contractor in Spain bugging you, meeting Julian Assange, Jeffrey Robertson, QC, one of the most famous human rights barristers. But again, Vanessa Barretra, the judge in Westminster Court on Monday, didn't seem to say that any of that is relevant to the fact that proceedings cannot be delayed in reference to his extradition to a grand jury in the United States.
And she gave no argument why. The decision was made simply because the decision had been preordained, set. This is what the state wants, and this is what the state will get, regardless of anything to do with the court, regardless of any defense argument. Britain has, in its justice system, there is perhaps a glimmer of hope, as I've just said, when it goes, perhaps there is, when it goes into higher courts. There is no hope in the United States, which is a false democracy. The justice doesn't exist there.
You've been working in journalism for half a century or whatever. Why would anyone in a BBC newsroom, an ITN newsroom, say, this is not worthy of even covering on the main bulletin here in England? Because they're not interested in this case.
They don't even have to say that. They don't have to conspire to say it. It's absolutely built into a system of media that is an extension of the state, an extension of the established order. They're in such cahoots. They collude so deeply with the establishment of their country, and that now means the intelligence agencies. They have the power now in Western societies. They collude so deeply with them that they dare not speak up. But I suggest if this whole grotesque charade against Julian Assange goes on, they should speak up pretty quickly.
And the deliberate action, the source of this, is a rogue state. A state that ignores its own laws and ignores the laws, international laws, and the laws of this country, like the United States. And for Britain to go along with it is not just a judicial disgrace, it's a moral disgrace. Yes. It's a national disgrace.